The House Committee on Economic Competitiveness will come to order. Would the clerk please take roll?
Chair Hoadley.
Here.
Representatives Bohnak.
Here.
Outman.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Bagol.
Here.
DeBoyer.
Here.
St. Germain. Here. Grant. Here. Brixey. Here. Tate.
Here.
Kofia. Here. Mr. Chair, you have 11 members present. You do have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Representative Harris makes a motion to approve the previous committee minutes from our last meeting, which was September 17th. Seeing no objections, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. All right, today we've got quite a few bills to get through, so we're going to try to get through this pretty quick and bring multiple people up at the same time. But today we will hear testimony on a package of bills that would amend Michigan's occupational code to remove restrictions and foster economic development. These bills are 4913, 4914, 4915, 4927, 4933. We have already had several discussions about these bills. There are a lot of opinions on the subject. With only 9 minutes to discuss them. So with that, let's begin with 4913 and 4914 with Reps. Bohnak and Outman. So if you would please take center stage, gentlemen. Welcome, gentlemen. You know the drill, so begin when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today in support of House Bill 4913. House Bill 4913 proposes an important update to Section 2004 of the Occupational Code of 1980, specifically regarding the licensure requirements for architects. The bill would allow apprenticeships to count toward the professional experience requirement needed for licensure. Currently, candidates for licensure must document professional experience in architectural work, which often requires formal employment or supervised work by a licensed architect. House Bill 4913 expands flexibility in how that experience can be obtained while maintaining the same high standards for professional practice. A person would still be required to meet all the same key licensing requirements, such as holding a professional degree in architecture or equivalent credential approved by the Board of Architects. They would still need to pass the required examinations demonstrating qualifications to practice architecture and demonstrate good moral character, and provide documentation of relevant professional experience, with the important addition that an apprenticeship may now satisfy this requirement. By recognizing apprenticeships as a valid form of professional experience, this bill strengthens Michigan's architectural workforce, supports smaller firms in rural communities, and aligns with modern workforce development practices. There should be no additional cost. This bill simply modifies licensure eligibility criteria within the existing framework of the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. Michigan should join states like Wisconsin, California, and New York, which have already moved toward a more flexible pathway to architectural licensing. And we're working with stakeholders, too, to make some needed changes to some of the language in the bill. Thank you.
Great. Before taking questions, Representative Outman, you want to continue on so we can just keep the flow?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Chair Hoadley and fellow committee members, for the opportunity to discuss this legislation. House Bill 4914 would simply remove the requirement that 2/3 of a firm's principals be licensed to practice architecture, engineering, or surveying. Now, this bill comes from a February 2025 Lara report outlining ways in which the legislature could cut unnecessary red tape and promote business here in Michigan. The removal of this requirement would not impact public safety or the quality of the work being done. Any project being done would still have to be performed by an individual licensed by the state, regardless of the firm's ownership. Now, my hope is that this bill would pave the way for an increase in the number of firms in this state. By removing that 2/3 ownership requirement, we open the door to more people taking a chance and opening a new business. So with that, thank you again, Chair Hoadley, for the opportunity to speak on this bill, and happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Great. Right now, oh, wait a minute. All right, Representative Grant does have a question.
Thank you. I actually have one question on each bill, and it's more clarification, some understanding. Representative Bohnak, when I read the language of the bill, my first question was around where it says that you provide evidence of completion of first professional degree or further degree in architecture or the equivalent of those things. That sounds a little bit different than what you're saying, so I just want to make sure that I have this right. Because my original question walking in was asking what would qualify as or the equivalent of a first professional degree. But what I'm hearing is that it would require a degree and an apprenticeship. Is that correct?
It would require a degree, or apprenticeship could substitute for some of the requirements for licensure. That's all it really does. So you still need a professional degree, even though in order to get the license, you'd have to have a degree. That's a given. And then the apprenticeship would work toward helping you to get licensure. Right now, that isn't the case. An apprenticeship does not allow that. So that's what we're trying to do, expand the flexibility a little bit.
Okay. And so I guess just my question would be, if in the language of the bill, and I know you said you're still working
Yes,
with
we are.
stakeholders, right now it's still pretty broad and saying, or the equivalent of a first professional degree.
Right. We have to clean up some of the language, and we also lumped in engineers with this, and they weren't happy about this at all. So that's some of the changes we have to make.
Thank you. And I'm sorry for your bill, Representative Outman. My question is around what is the reason for the 2/3 requirement right now? I just want to understand that as we look at the removal of it.
I'm really not sure. To me, it doesn't make a ton of sense, and it seems like Michigan is kind of unique in that circumstance. But I really don't have a good answer for that, Representative.
Okay. In some of my conversations, it looks like that it helps with who is accountable. And so my question is if we remove that as far as accountability, because when you hold a license, you're accountable for the work. If we remove that requirement and ensuring that there are licensed people at the firm who are accountable, who will that accountability move to?
As long as there are people that are licensed and can stamp, could give that architecture stamps on the final project, I think that would satisfy a lot of concerns. A lot of people, including Laura, it feels like it's unnecessary to have 2/3 of the principal owners be a licensed architecture. It just seems a little overly burdensome.
So the accountability is on the individual architects versus like the firm in this case if we remove that accountability piece.
Right. There still will be accountability. There still will be a licensed architect that will sign off and give that final approval before moving forward. Again, this just removes a barrier that 2/3 of the principal owners have to be licensed architecture.
Representative Brixey.
Is Lara here to testify in support of this then?
I'm not sure who's slated to testify.
Is Lara in support of the bills then?
It was issued from the report, so I'm assuming yes.
Okay, but did you request their support of the bill? Because our documents say that they haven't put in support.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to Laura directly. I just know that this came from the report that they issued from this year.
Thank you. And as a reminder, that's why we're going through the committee process, is to massage this through, and thank you both for your willingness to want to, even take on the ugly portion of this and work this through. There's work to be done, right? And that's what this committee process is for, get opposition, support, and massage this through to have something good at the end of the line. We're not, definitely not wanting to rush things through on subject matter that's important. But, seeing no other questions, thank you both
Yep.
for your testimony.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, great. Before we continue on, we do have Paige Faltz from Lara here, if she'd like to come up and answer a couple of these questions. Great. Thank you, Paige.
Hello, no problem. Yes, so I can discuss a few of these. First of all, Lara is working with individual sponsors. We submitted some recommendations for implementation that we have provided. So right now we don't have an official position, but we are working to get there. They were recommendations from Lara's red tape report, so that part is accurate. And so we are going to hopefully get to a point of being able to support. We've been working with, lawmakers on both sides and closely with Rep. Schuette's office as well.
Representative Brixey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you explain why the architects are being held to different standards, why the landscape architects are being held to different standards than the architects, residential builders, land surveyors, and professional engineers?
Yes, so landscape architects have been deemed that their licensure is not necessary to protect public safety. So that was one of the reasons the recommendations in the red tape report are different. Architects are responsible for the building we stand in, and so those were some of the differences when the red tape report was being discussed, that landscape architects wouldn't impact your safety.
Thank you.
Minority Vice Chair Grant.
Thank you. And I know you said discussions and things are ongoing and you have recommendations, but just in general, Lara supports the removal of the 2/3 ownership piece. Is that?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, actually, we were discussing this a little bit in the back of the room. We obviously it's not apples to apples, but we did compare it to being like a salon owner. You can be a salon owner, but not a cosmetologist. You wouldn't be able to cut hair. This would line it up with something very similar along those lines, opening for more individuals and firms, as was testified earlier. So that did come from Lara's red tape report.
Thank you. And I know that several other states have similar requirements. Are you looking at lowering the threshold or a complete removal?
Our recommendation was a complete removal.
Great, thanks. And again, remind members too, is we look to the agencies for recommendations, not permission to move forward with legislation. So thank you, Paige.
Thank you.
Great, moving on. Wishing to speak opposes the bill is Thomas Reeder from the, I'm guessing the American, what's the group? I'll let you introduce yourself and the group that you're with. Please come on up and begin when you're ready.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Tom Reeder. I'm an architect. I'm the current vice president of Michigan AIA, American Institute of Architects. I'm the 2026 president of Michigan AIA as well. So I'm here representing the architects. As far as 4913 goes, we are not in favor of this bill reducing the education requirements. Is not in the interest of the public. Architects are charged with protecting health, safety, and welfare of the public, and making it easier to obtain a license is not in anyone's best interest. Bill 4913 replaces education with apprenticeship, but does not describe any detail which is unsatisfactory to us. We have been working with NCARB, which is the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, and that is the entity that holds my credentials and decides whether I can sit for the license or not. On developing alternative path to licensure, which I feel is what we're really trying to achieve here. We would like to ask that we don't move forward here and not produce something that's going to honestly create more harm than good. Okay, AIA is willing to assist in further research and providing information with the assistance of NCARB, and NCARB has offered to help in this regard as well. Just trying to get it right the first time. Okay, AI does request the opportunity to discuss licensure of architects in Michigan and alternative paths of licensure, and would like to continue discussions with legislatures, LARA, and the Board of Architects. NCRB, which is NCARB, and NAAB, which is the National Architecture Accreditation Board, and that is the board that certifies schools to teach architecture, accreditates the schools, are willing to, and as well as several other states, do have models that can be provided and we could consider following, okay? The models that were suggested, California, New York, those have, there's elements of those that we could use, but I wouldn't call them perfect, and obviously I think we could do better. So that is all I have on 4913.
Great, thank you. Seeing no questions, that'll be all. Thank you very much for your testimony. Continuing on, also wishing to speak in opposition to the bill is Ron Brink from the American Council of Engineering Companies. Please come up and begin when you're ready, Mr. Brink. And correct me if I pronounce that wrong too, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it on? Yeah, it's Brinky, like the Brinky fish ladder. That was one of my past uncles. Thank you very much for the time to talk today. I represent the American Council of Engineering Companies, which is an association that represents private consulting firms throughout Michigan. We have over 100 members who really do a lot of the infrastructure improvements throughout the state. I understand a lot of these changes have come out of the LARA red tape report, cutting red tape report. Unfortunately, we did not have any input into that. We were not consulted at all when they suggested these changes. And as I understand it, these were never brought to the professional boards that exist as advisory committees to LARA to help, discuss some of these changes. Unfortunately, we are here to oppose the bills. Lowering the competency and qualifications of design professionals and firms doesn't seem like a good idea to us. House Bill 4913 allows an individual to become licensed without attaining a bachelor's degree in engineering. Licensed engineers design bridges that you drive over. They design football stadiums that hundreds of thousands of people sit in on Saturdays. They design water treatment facilities that provide clean drinking water to our millions of residents in Michigan. They protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. That's why they're licensed. Lowering the bar to obtain licensure by eliminating a degree in engineering is something that we cannot support. There's too much risk involved for owners and for the general public. This could also create reciprocity issues with other states, because most other states do require you to have an engineering degree in order to be a licensed professional. So it could prohibit those folks from working in other states as well. We're happy to discuss ways just to cut red tape and streamline processes. 100% in favor of that. We could work and have suggestions to that, but lowering the bar to obtain licensure doesn't seem like a cutting the red tape idea. Would you like me to also address the other bill, or do you just want to focus on this one?
No, absolutely. It's a bill package.
Okay. House Bill 4914 was also a recommendation that came out that didn't have any input from our industry. We authored a letter on behalf of ACEC, the American Institute of Architects, MSPE, and MSPS to Laura, expressing our concerns with this idea and recommendation when it came out before bills were introduced. We believe it's important that company owners of design professional firms who are making decisions that affect the health, safety, and welfare of the public include licensed professionals. Having a majority of those folks running the company and affecting the decisions that are made by that company, we think are very important. And eliminating that requirement is lowering a standard or lowering some safety concerns that we have within those companies. The firms work independently for owners, and typically many of the engineers who complete the design and oversee construction are, I'm sorry, lost my place here. Typically, an owner agency will hire an engineering company to do the design for a project. And these companies are made up of licensed professionals. They meet the 2/3 requirement. If you remove this requirement, you could get companies coming in wanting to do engineering work that don't have the ownership or the plethora of engineers in their company. You could have a construction company come in and say, well, I can do the design now. I don't need an engineering firm to do this. And we don't believe that's a good idea. Because when you design a building or a highway or a bridge, there's multiple parts of that, right? There's a foundation, there's structural steel, there's many components to that. And just having one licensed engineer, which would now be the minimum standard within a company, doesn't seem to be a safe alternative. So as I mentioned, we represent hundreds of engineering companies. We have not had any companies come to us and say, you need to change this requirement. This is a problem within our industry. So we don't really understand where this came from. We work on issues all the time affecting our industry, work on the business of engineering, and we have not had that, have not had any of those individuals come to us. I have companies that say, hey, we want to do work in Michigan. How do we go about that? And I help them through the process with Laura. But we've never had them come back to say, hey, this is ridiculous. We can't get licensed. We can't do work here. So I'll end there and be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. And we do have a couple questions. Representative Outman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ron, for being here. Appreciate the dialogue earlier.
Absolutely.
Ron, how many states have this 2/3 requirement?
I don't know exactly. I'm pretty sure Connecticut. I think there's several other states that have it.
It's less than 10. Connecticut is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
It is less than 10 that have this requirement, including some states that did have this requirement. Iowa, for example, had this 2/3 requirement, and they actually repealed it back in 2014. So, we are very much in the minority with this. I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say we hold our engineering companies to a higher standard.
Do we do?
Do
we do a better job than the rest of the nation?
What's that?
Do we do a better job than the entire rest of the nation?
Oh yeah, we're the best.
Are we?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think we do a great job, and I think it's a protection issue. That you're making sure that an owner isn't focused on financial gains versus doing the right thing.
Don't you think imitation is the best form of flattery? And if we were doing things so well that the rest of the nation would follow suit, don't you think that would take place?
Possibly.
But that's not taking place.
I don't know what the movement is from the states.
They're going the opposite direction, it seems like.
I guess it depends.
And I don't
on
know
the
if that's beneficial, harmful. I would love to assess the effects of it, but I just wanted to put that on your radar, and maybe you guys can talk about it as an association and see whether this is worthy and valuable. And I'd love to continue that conversation with you.
Appreciate that.
But I just
Absolutely.
I just wanted to put this on your radar a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you. Representative DeBoyer?
Thank you, Chair. Ron, thanks for being here. Just a couple quick questions. I don't disagree with everything that you've said there. In my other world, I'm involved in structural engineering, and but isn't it true that we have state statutes that require certain size buildings, certain civil undertakings that are required that they're signed off, certified, sealed by a competent structural civil engineer, whomever it may be, whether it be a mechanical issue as well. Those kinds of statutes exist that say that that has to be oversawn. At the end, the responsibility resides with the engineer that puts the seal on it and signs that seal. So that does exist, correct? I'm not just pulling that out of my brain thinking that
that's
exists.
true.
Okay. So what that means, though, potentially is that the owner of that organization has to rely and trust the engineer that works for that organization. And although I understand your argument from the perspective of, well, it can't just be about making money. Well, the reality is in our structure, the better you are, the safer you are, the better reputation you have, the more likely you will be to be successful in your industry. So I do think that the fact that we have statutes in place that require if you build a house over a certain square footage, it has to be a signed, sealed, engineered, certified architectural plan. There are provisions in place that hedge against the risk of someone designing a building that is not a certified engineer, because that building will not be approved by the local building inspector or the state building inspector, and that plan will not be able to be used until that plan is certified by an engineer, saying that it is designed safely, all the structural components are in place, all the structural components meet statute or ordinance. So I think it's important that we realize that this is not just the only stopgap that exists with protection of this building we're setting in. There's many things that are in ordinance and in law that lay out that need and requirement for an engineer to certify something. So I want to make sure that was aired here, that it's not just, if we do this, it's going to be the wild, wild west in design and engineering. I spend thousands of hours a year in consultation with structural engineers, and experience, frankly, is the number one component with designing, right? You know what you've seen, you know what you've done, you know what works, you know what your mentors have done. That's the most important, right? We can sit in a classroom all day, but when you actually put it in application, because trust me, I see lots of architectural plans that are horribly bad drawn and bad designed by engineers. So I think I appreciate you being here. I don't disagree with everything you said, but I do think it's important that this body understands there's more to the protection than just who owns the engineering firm. So thanks for that, Ron.
Thank you. Representative Begol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ron, thanks for coming in and helping us understand some of this. One of the questions I have is, it says that there's a requirement for the firm to have a minimum 2/3 of its principal license to practice architecture, engineering, and surveying. Is there a requirement for 2/3 to sign off on each project? No? So one person could approve a project?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm just trying to understand why the 2/3 is in place if there's no requirement for both people to review it and then do an approval and make sure the first one didn't make some error calculation or.
Right. I understand this was put in place a long time ago to make sure that decisions being made by that company are to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. So, you can create a company by hiring an engineer. I'm not saying you can't, but you want to build a company that has a history of experience within the firm for different disciplines, and that has created some experience doing projects. But this removing this could allow anybody to start an engineering company and hire an engineer. And we don't think that that's going to get the same results as companies that have actual professional engineers as owners, that have gone through the schooling, that have gone through the requirements to become licensed, and that their focus is much different than a private equity firm or something coming in and say, hey, I'm gonna start an engineering company to make some money. So we just think that it's a protection that owners are going to ultimately make the final decisions. Obviously engineers have an ethics and responsibility to do that, but they answer to the owners. And so they will have influence over some of their decisions. So that's why we think that 2/3 was there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Seeing no other questions from members, thank you again, Ron, for your testimony. Moving on, we are going to take up House Bill 4915 from Representative Maddock. If you'd like to come up and also bring your guest as well, I think is Mr. Kurt Maselli? All right, I got that one right. Great, yeah, if you guys would, go ahead and begin when ready. You know the drill.
Picture this. Every state is like a large swimming pool. Some states have warm water, clear water, like Florida. Some states like New York and California have murky water, cold water, and every state has to attract people and businesses, right? So everyone wants to jump into a nice warm swimming pool with clear water. Unfortunately, Michigan has cold water with sharks in it, and no one wants to go to Michigan. I think we should name this committee the Shark Removal Committee, removing the sharks from the swimming pool to make Michigan great again. We're here to talk about division, exclusion, and indoctrination. Dr. Kurt Maselli is going to tell us about some of the experiences that he has, and so we can actually feel the pain of some of these regulations. And he represents an organization called Do No Harm. They represent about 40,000 physicians and others, and about 4,000 in Michigan. Take it away.
And Mr. Chair, I'll defer to my colleague, Dr. Sarandolo, to start. She is on Zoom. She is also here testifying, if that is acceptable.
Great, can you hear us?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Great, yep, begin when you're ready.
Excellent, thank you. Chair Hoadley and members of the committee, I thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Dr. Aida Chirundolo, and I support HB 4915. And I am an emergency medicine physician with over 20 years of clinical experience, and I'm also a volunteer for the organization Do No Harm. I hold active medical licenses in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Hawaii, and I am speaking to you today, even though I do not practice in your state, because I firmly believe that ethical medical care transcends state lines. Implicit bias training does not promote ethical medical care nor the fair treatment of others. Implicit bias is defined in Governor Whitmer's Executive Order number 2020-7 as, quote, thoughts and feelings that, by definition, often exist outside of conscious awareness and therefore are difficult to control, end quote. The systematic review referenced in the executive order declares, quote, most healthcare providers appear to have implicit bias in terms of positive attitudes toward whites and negative attitudes toward people of color, end quote. This research uses the implicit association test as a means of arriving at this sweeping conclusion. You may be wondering, how are we even aware of thoughts and feelings if they, quote, exist outside of conscious awareness, end quote. The premise of implicit bias rests on the implicit association test, a psychological tool introduced in 1998 that purports to uncover these unconscious thoughts. This test measures a person's reaction times to paired concepts. These reaction times are advertised as a way to expose a person's unconscious preference for one concept over another. The race version of this tool measures reaction times to light-skinned faces and dark-skinned faces, promoting the idea that a longer reaction time to dark-skinned faces represents a bias against dark skin. But the implicit association test only measures reaction times. It does not detect the feelings that people have to the concepts being presented. There is no evidence to support the claim that a shorter reaction time equals a positive feeling and a longer reaction time equals a negative feeling. It is unclear what the reaction times even represent, let alone bias or racism. The test has low validity and reliability and has not been shown to predict racist behaviors. But despite these uncertainties, the medical establishment and other industries continue to push implicit bias trainings as a requirement for certification and licensure. In the words of one social psychologist, Dr. Lee Jussum, quote, there is currently no clear evidence that implicit bias trainings accomplish anything other than teaching people about the research on implicit bias, end quote. I would add to that statement and say that implicit bias trainings actually teach the evils of racism we seek to overcome. I was required to complete implicit bias training as a condition of my Massachusetts medical license recertification. This training taught me that Black patients do better with Black doctors, a concept known as racial concordance. The lecturer referenced a study concluding that Black newborns treated by white physicians suffer a 50% greater mortality rate than those treated by Black physicians, painting a grotesque picture of white doctors directing their intrinsic racism at their most helpless patients. But this conclusion has been soundly debunked. The researchers failed to include a highly relevant piece of information, very low birth weight, which is a major factor in newborn mortality. When controlling for this variable, the connection between infant mortality and physician-patient racial concordance disappears. Now, imagine if doctors were required to undergo trainings as a condition for medical licensure that taught them that white patients do better with white doctors. We have a word for that. It's racism. The truth is that the idea of implicit bias and the trainings that promote it actually encourage bias. These concepts are rooted in the notion that people have inherent deficiency and biases simply because of the skin melanin content. Implicit bias trainings teach participants to focus on another person's immutable characteristics in order to counter their own presumed unconscious feelings and use these observations to make decisions. In the medical context, this means doctors must judge patients on their superficial attributes and make clinical decisions not solely on objective facts and data, but also on skin color and other immutable characteristics. This is called discrimination. It is dangerous, it is unethical, and it is wrong. For this reason, I urge the committee to vote to remove implicit bias trainings as a condition for licensure or any other certification requirement in Michigan. Thank you, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Being no questions, if you'd like to continue on.
Chair Hoadley and members of the Committee on Economic Competitiveness, my name is Kurt Maselli and I serve as Medical Director for Do No Harm Action, the sister advocacy organization affiliated with Do No Harm, a group of over 40,000 healthcare professionals, patients, and policymakers with nearly 4,000 members here in Michigan. We're committed to ensuring that the practice of medicine is driven by scientific evidence rather than ideology, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of this bill. As we've heard, since 2022, the mandate on implicit bias training applies to 26 healthcare professions, nearly 400,000 healthcare professionals within the state of Michigan. At the 2 to 3 hours per training that is needed in order to maintain one's licensure, that's about 1 million hours of training through a licensing period that one needs to obtain. For context, and this mandate really stemmed from the belief that such biases lead to disparities in healthcare delivery. Now, while disparities do exist, attributing them to implicit bias ignores the impact of other factors like genetics, medical comorbidities, access to care, individual choices. One Michigan physician described the mandate as indoctrination, saying it distracts from the goal of improving health care for all people. Another Michigan licensed doctor told our organization that as a radiologist, he just sees x-rays. He never knows the patient's race, sexual preference, or the like. Nonetheless, implicit bias training assumes healthcare professionals like these harbor unconscious prejudices, and it suggests that their provider is treating them less equally and providing inferior care. This assumption is divisive and undermines the trust in providers. If your doctor is biased against you, why would you go to them? Why would you trust the recommendations that they provide? I think it's important to remember that as physicians, as healthcare providers, we have an obligation to treat all patients in a safe and fair manner, period, and to do that without any regard to race or gender, or age or like. I'd also add that beyond these concerns, the implicit bias training mandate imposes opportunity costs, diverting financial resources, but more importantly, time from medically relevant continuing medical education. Again, we're asking doctors to spend 2 to 3 hours and other healthcare professionals to spend this time in their licensing renewal, when perhaps it'd be better if they were looking at medical literature to study those medical comorbidities and address them in a much better manner. Also, in a time of physician shortages and healthcare provider shortages, such mandates frustrate providers and don't help resolve the stagnation that we've seen in the number of Michigan licensed physicians, for instance. If we look at data from the Federal State Medical Board from 2016 to 2024, the number of physicians in Michigan has remained the same at 47,000. States neighboring, without these requirements, have seen a growth in their physician populations by about 8,000 physicians each. This implicit bias training mandate places an undue burden on many dedicated healthcare professionals who work tirelessly to care for patients. Michigan should not make a licensure contingent on affirming an ideology. On behalf of our Michigan members, I respectfully urge you to end the implicit bias training mandate. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have one question from Representative Outman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Not really a question, but just a comment. Really, I just want to thank you for bringing this forward, Representative Maddock, and thank you, Kurt, for being here. I've literally had doctors call my office asking us to remove this mandate. I've had other doctors call and say that they're walking away from the field entirely because of this. And then they're at the tail end of their career anyway, but it's just one more thing that they don't want to deal with. And so I just want to echo that important point that you made, that we are facing a doctor shortage here in this state, and burdensome mandates like this just don't help our case any. So again, thank you for bringing this legislation forward, and thank you for being here, sir.
I got a quick question. Is it fair to say that this regulation would cost us 200 doctors a year in Michigan that would choose to just walk away or just say, I'm not going to go there? We talked about that a little bit earlier. Is 200 a fair number?
I don't know a definitive number, but I think that's completely within reason. And we do see doctors who are at the margin, for instance, right, determining whether should I still practice or should I not. And we've heard from these members. I mean, we've heard from 2,000 different healthcare providers from the state of Michigan. And frankly, Michigan is actually our largest member organization as part of Do No Harm. We have the most members from Michigan. So I think it is a very real concern that folks that are at the margins in different stages in their career are deciding whether to come to Michigan or not, may be more inclined not to come as a result of a mandate like this.
Thank you. Moving on, Representative St. Germain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if I missed it, but is there any data at all that proves that bias training actually works in the workforce?
There's no data that, and thank you for the question, there's no data that I know of that implicit bias training would actually help to make change. And as Dr. Cherundolo had mentioned, one of the challenges is that much of this training is anchored in the implicit association test, which itself is a flawed mechanism to even judge and determine whether one has implicit bias or not. So I think part of the problem starts with just the test itself that we're using as a measure of bias. And when that is sort of flawed and broken, it's hard to fix something that you have a test that's not even telling you the right answers. The false positives that we see with the test are astounding, and that's effectively sort of saying that someone has racial bias when in fact they don't. And likewise, there are also false negatives with it as well, where the test may say you don't have bias, but you may very well have that in terms of your actions. But I haven't seen any data that actually shows that there's been benefit from such training, and if anything, any such benefit is probably very much elusive.
Thank you. Minority Vice Chair Grant has a question.
Thank you. Actually have a couple. So is it your organization that is requesting this legislation, or just a larger representative? Is it something that you brought forward, or a larger group?
We have not specifically requested this legislation, although we're very much in favor of ending an implicit bias training mandate. Again, it's our belief that we should do everything we can to take identity politics out of medicine and focus on quality, the individual that we're caring for, and allow for that to happen.
Thank you. What is the current requirement around implicit bias training? What does it entail?
So it entails a 2 to 3 hour training that one must take. I believe if you have your initial licensure, it's a 2-hour requirement. For renewals, it's a 3-hour. And it is on every licensing cycle, so it's not sort of a once and done. It's one that you would have to do on a continued basis. And it applies
How long
to
is the cycle?
Typically 2 or 3 years might that cycle be.
So 2 out first in the beginning, 2 to 3 hours, and then every few years an additional 2 hours.
First in the beginning, 2 hours, and then 3 hours.
Okay.
On the renewal.
And so about 200 doctors a year believe that 3 hours of training is worth them leaving the profession? I want to make sure
I think it's, and I appreciate the question. I think it's really the culmination of the challenges that are faced within, again, whether it's physician community or other healthcare providers, where many physicians and the like have faced different mandates and different of the such. I mean, we've heard from different members that have told us, well, why would I bother doing this? I might as well just sort of retire now, or I might as well just sort of practice in a different state. And we've had over 2,000 members from Michigan who've spoken to us about the issue related to implicit bias
So
training.
yes, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I get to, so yes, we're seeing with that 3-hour requirement that hundreds of doctors are looking at potentially leaving the profession.
I believe it's a factor. I wouldn't want to say it's the only factor, but a factor.
So it is about larger requirements, not just implicit bias training.
I would say it's a key requirement in
Okay.
in terms of the frustration that folks express.
Okay. Also, what I'm hearing is that there are discrepancies that you believe are present, but that there may be better ways to address them, or that what the outcome that we're trying to reach, this training does not help us get there. I just want to make sure I understand, like, do you believe that there is a problem that should be addressed, or do you believe there's not a problem and that's why this isn't needed?
I appreciate the question. There are disparities in healthcare, and we can always continue to do better. And I think our emphasis would be better focused on what can we do to address things like diabetes or hypertension or different types of illnesses that are impacting folks in negative ways. And if we direct our attention towards those, I think we'll be doing a much better job in educating our workforce and such. And granted, there are requirements for folks, again, physicians particularly, to take continuing medical education as part of licensing, as part of their board certification and the like. And it's our organization's belief and my belief that we should focus those on the content of the medical education that can help that physician, that healthcare professional, be the very best in the context of caring for the individual before them.
Okay, I know others have questions, so thank you.
Great, and thank you. And we've all heard the term "time is money," right? In the healthcare field, time is also life and death. So in a 3-hour period, I mean, how many patients are often seen, or typically seen in a 3-hour duration, times that many doctors?
Yeah, if you see patients every 15 minutes, I mean, that's 12 patients within 3 hours.
Yeah, great, thank you. Moving on, we do have a question from Representative Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for being here. As a law enforcement officer, I've attended implicit bias training for, I don't know, probably 15 to 17 years every year. But I don't know, and I think Representative Grant had brought up just some questions on what does that entail for the medical profession. I guess my question is, with the implicit bias training that you folks have to take, does it include any medical techniques that actually assist with the treatment or of a illness or injury? Or is this something that's outside the direct medical care of a patient?
I appreciate the question. I would say that it's oftentimes outside of the care as opposed to related to the individual before us, and I think oftentimes these courses are filled with more so philosophical theory about what implicit bias is and the like, and frankly sometimes that brings different types of jargon from that is more identity politics focused as opposed to what is it that we're aiming to do? What is the science in terms of the disease entity, and how can we do better in terms of treatment? So I think oftentimes it takes more of a philosophical, ideological slant, which again creates more of that divisiveness as opposed to how do we just focus on the patient and doing what's right for them.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Representative Kofia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony today. I guess I'm hearing that the sentiment is that this particular type of training doesn't work to address implicit bias. Are there other, and full disclosure, I grew up in a small community of people who looked just like me, and I didn't used to think that implicit bias was real because it didn't affect me. I'm not a doctor, but I believe when you learn better, you do better. You listen to people and they share their experience with, whether it's the medical system or in society in general, that implicit bias does exist and we have to be willing to learn and grow. So I hear you that you don't feel like this particular test helps people identify their own implicit bias. Do you believe implicit bias exists within the healthcare profession? And if it does, what is a better way to get at that?
I appreciate the question. I think, it is certainly possible that different folks with different perspectives, and again, different experiences may have biases that from their life experience and the like. I think the challenge here is sort of using that notion of implicit bias as the etiology behind the reason that we see disparities in care. And I think much to Dr. Cherundolo's point, when we look at a study that actually mislabels the real cause for infant mortality, we end up looking at racism and such as being the cause, when in fact that's not the case at all. It's really low birth weight, and would be much better served by addressing low birth weight as opposed to any such concept that really isn't driving that home. In my training, again, this is 20 years ago, going back to medical school and the such, I think one of the things that has been helpful for folks is to understand a cultural competency, to recognize that, yeah, not everyone is like you. Everyone is different. And that aspect's important. I mean, it's important if someone is Jehovah's Witness and they're not going to take blood products. I mean, there are very real medical consequences that can come from having an appreciation of just listening and understanding who a person is. And again, not necessarily even by identity group, but just by who they are. I'm a psychiatrist by training, so listening is part of the job, but that should really be, again, part and parcel. It's part of all physicians in terms of understanding who their patients are. So I think more of our focus on the clinical skills and how we can build our clinical acumen is probably a better place for us to address our resources and the like. And again, to make folks really excellent at what they do so they can speak and bring that expertise to individuals. I think, unfortunately, the implicit bias mandate introduces an element that creates more division and blames racism when we really want to be tackling cancer and disease to get our patients better.
Sure, I appreciate that, but I asked the question if you don't feel this is the appropriate mechanism to help people in the healthcare profession who I just came through cancer. It's very important for me that my physicians are as well equipped as possible to deal with me. And I think everybody should be willing, be able to expect that. So if this is not the tool to help people in the healthcare profession who hold life and death in their hands, to recognize if they do in fact have an implicit bias because they make assumptions about their patient. If this is not the mechanism, what is the mechanism to get at implicit bias and potentially racism or sexism, et cetera? And I'm asking the doctor here.
I think the mechanism is to train really well-qualified physicians to, again, know their trade, know it well. We as physicians take an oath to do no harm. We abide by that. I think there's an important ethical and moral responsibility that we have. We have ethics classes within the context of medical school in order to understand those different parameters. So I think much in the way of crafting that and understanding that is there. I think, unfortunately, when we inject the division into the fact that outcomes are be determined because physicians harbor a racist ideology, I think, unfortunately, that drives folks away and it creates reactions that are truly adverse. I mean, there's a study that came out of a group at Rutgers that actually looked at having different folks read passages, one from Ibram Kendi in terms of anti-racism and another from just a sort of very generic passage about corn. And then it sort of also provided a case study for these two different groups. The case study was someone applies for a job and ends up not getting it. And the group that sort of read the passage on anti-racism ended up already putting a racial lens on why that person didn't get a job, even though there was nothing evident in the reason the person didn't get the job within that context. The folks that read the corn passage didn't have that same lens. So I think, unfortunately, the division, that the idea of an implicit bias mandate training that we don't see any benefit from, that's anchored in a test that really isn't reliable, isn't reproducible, isn't predictive, is not helpful. I think we are better focused in the physician community focused on building and training excellent, compassionate doctors who can exceed in the quality of care.
Thank you. You did not answer my question, but I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you. We still have a lot to get through, so we do have a couple more questions, and we do have a few individuals that'd like to come up and speak regarding this bill too. So we are going to take a couple questions from our members here, but please keep your question short and the same with the answer. So with that being said, Minority Vice Chair Grant.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about your organization, just so we understand. I do appreciate you providing, numbers of who's included in numbers of how many, concerns you've heard about this, and also saying that you want to make sure that you keep political ideology out of the medical field. I understand that, but doing a look at your organization, it does seem pretty political. So I'm wondering, the first thing that you see is we are a National Association of Medical Professionals combating the attack on our healthcare system from woke activists. So who does your membership include, and what is the real focus of the work that you all do?
I appreciate the question. We are an organization of over 40,000 members. Anyone is able to join, so it's concerned citizens as well as healthcare professionals, lawmakers, anyone. We have about 1/3 of our membership is within the healthcare profession. We focus on two main issues, one being, again, getting DEI and political ideology out of medicine, and also keeping kids safe from gender ideology in the form of pediatric medical transition, and aiming to end that. We are an education group. There is Do No Harm, which is the educational group. There's Do No Harm Action, which is more in the legislative arm.
All right, thank you. I do appreciate the robust conversation, but we do have to move on. We do have a couple individuals that, no? Just card, we're just reading it? I thought you wish to speak. Well, great, that'll make it a lot easier. Thank you both for your testimony, and
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to continued conversations.
Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you. So we do have a couple cards to read in on this bill. In opposition to the bill, we have Danielle Atkinson from Mothering Justice. Also opposing the bill is Paige Fultz from Lara. Great. So moving on, we're going to take testimony from Representative Fairbairn on House Bill 4927. Representative, would you please come up and begin when you're ready? And yes, bring your guests up at the same time. As much as we can do to expedite moving this along would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Representative.
Thank you. While we're getting ready for the next bill, I'd like to formally request that you give us another meeting of testimony on the previous bills. I didn't get a chance to ask my questions.
Thank you. Noted. Go ahead, Representative.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm here this morning to speak. It's almost afternoon now, actually, but still a morning, to speak in support of House Bill 4927. It's a bill I sponsored as a part of a really great package, the 2025 Red Tape Reduction Package. Though this bill is intended to reduce the statutory requirements for obtaining a barber's license in the state of Michigan, in order to provide a bit of perspective by telling you what it takes to become a commercial pilot and fly people and cargo, let's say Lansing to Mackinac Island, an aspiring commercial pilot needs to complete 100 hours of pilot in command time, 50 hours of cross-country time, 20 hours training with an instructor, 10 hours of complex aircraft time, 10 hours of instrument training, 300 nautical mile cross-country flight, 100 hours of ground school, 10 hours of solo training, 5 hours of night flying, 20 hours of instrument flight, which totals about 250 hours. Now this sounds fairly thorough and extensive preparation, and I don't know about you, but it gives me some level of confidence in the ability of a young pilot to handle an aircraft, a single-engine aircraft. But that 250 hours really pales in comparison to the 1,800 hours that the state of Michigan requires an aspiring barber to complete before being issued a license to cut your hair. If we are talking worst case scenario in the case of the pilot, it's a pretty bad circumstance. Worst case scenario in the case of a barber, you get a nick or a shorter haircut than you had hoped for. I'm not in any way diminishing the barbering profession nor those who practice it. On the contrary, I'm saying that these professionals should have a lower barrier to entry into their chosen field and would appreciate your support in really passing this legislation and changing the licensure hours from 1,800 to 1,500. To give you a professional perspective, I have with me today Lauren Moser, branch director, and then Roderick Samuels, education director of Hair Lab Detroit Barber School. With your permission, I'd like them to testify.
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here to speak on behalf of the barber industry. My name is Lauren Moser. I have been a licensed cosmetologist for over 25 years, and I have run a barber school for the last 6. It's in those 6 years that I have become really involved in reform of the barber industry. Hearing those numbers about pilots is a little scary, to be honest with you. And there are a lot more than bad haircuts coming out of deregulating the barber industry. There's disease prevention and things like that. So while they're learning haircuts, that's this much of the education. More of it is disease prevention and keeping the public safe. So we want to maintain some of the hours, but we just want to modernize it. So I sit here today to speak in strong support of Bill 4927, which would reduce the required hours for barber licensure from 1,800 to 1,500. This is a smart, necessary, and long overdue step towards modernizing a system that no longer serves today's students, schools, or workforce. We have come a long way in our technology, right? Everyone knows that information comes fast and hard. So we're able to grow a little faster, learn a little faster, get through programs a little faster. So this would bring us into 2025. Barbering is one of our country's oldest and most respected trades, but in Michigan, it's a trade trapped in a system that is both overregulated and under-enforced. We have layers of outdated requirements that make it harder to enter or teach in the field, yet at the same time, we lack consistent enforcement and oversight to protect the public and support legitimate schools. What we need is reform, not deregulation. Modern, common sense updates that align our laws with today's realities. Right now, our framework burdens those trying to do things the right way, while unlicensed activity continues to grow unchecked because there simply aren't enough licensed barbers or inspectors or schools to keep up with the demand. The 1,800 requirement is one of those outdated barriers. Reducing to 1,500 brings us in line with a majority of the country. There are only 4 states in our entire country that require barbers to go to school over 1,500 hours, and we're one of them. Our license in the state of Michigan is a little bit different because our barbers can do chemical services and things like that. Some of the other states that have the lower requirements, like 1,000 hours, typically do not, they aren't licensed to do chemical services. So keeping it at 1,500 continues to protect the public and make sure that these people understand how to use the chemicals that they're licensed to use. Chemicals used the wrong way can cause permanent alopecia. I don't know if anyone's aware of that. So it's beyond a bad haircut. We want to make sure that they're getting the full education so that they can continue to protect the public while bringing us into modern day. Reducing the hours to 1,500 brings us in line with a majority of the country. States that have training thresholds of 1,500 hours have seen higher completion rates, faster entry into the workplace, stronger pipeline for skilled professionals. This bill keeps every safeguard intact, the same testing, sanitation, and safety standards, but recognizes that modern curriculum can produce the same level of excellence in less time. Our reform is only part of what's broken. Michigan's barber industry is facing a critical instructor shortage, and current laws are a major reason why. A licensed barber must wait 2 full years and then complete an additional 1,000-hour and 1-year instruction program before they can even begin teaching on their own. Yet there are only a handful of instructor programs left in the entire state, and most barbers can't afford to take a year off to attend them. I hear from barbers all the time who are ready to teach, passionate, skilled professionals who want to give back, but they simply can't step away from their livelihood to do it. It's a system that is unintentionally discouraging the very people we need most. The result, schools are closing because they can't hire instructors. Whole regions of Michigan no longer have barber schools at all, meaning fewer licensed barbers, more unlicensed activity, and growing risk to public health and consumer safety. If we paired instructor reform with this bill, an additional bill that could be added later, Michigan could become a destination for qualified barbers and educators, a state known for opportunity, not red tape. We could attract instructors from around the country, open new schools, create legitimate licensed training programs that feed directly into our workforce and small business communities. HB 4927 is a meaningful start, but it should mark the beginning of a broader reform. Let's fix the barriers that are holding back our industry, our workforce. Let's make Michigan a model for how smart, responsible reform can strengthen education, create jobs, protect the public all at once. We have a real opportunity here to make Michigan a place where barbers, educators, and entrepreneurs want to build their future. HB 4927 is the first step towards that, and I urge you to keep going. Every time a student can't finish or a school can't open, we lose a taxpayer, a small business, and a community anchor. This reform isn't cosmetic, it's economic. Thank you for your time and for your commitment to modernizing our state's workforce laws, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and as well as my Director of Education.
Great. If you'd like to continue on it, but if we could keep it really short, I mean, like 30 seconds. We do have questions and we do have other bills to get through in the next 20 minutes, so please.
You can't be nasty and needy, so I want to say thank you so much for allowing me this time. Good afternoon, Chair and Chair members. My name is Roderick Samuels. I am the Director of Education at Hare Laboratory Barber School. I'm also a subject matter expert in barber education. Just to kind of piggyback off of this bill, I still work in the classroom every day. I see students come in every day. They're tired. They're working 12-hour shifts. They're trying to make a living while also chasing their dreams. What this bill is going to do is going to help so many young professionals, people in our industry, people in our communities, to give them an opportunity to work in trades, right? Not everybody's built for university. Not everybody's built for four-year college, but I do know for myself, being a college kick out, not a dropout. My mom and dad came to pick me up because my grades made it home before I did. But House Bill 4927, reducing those hours from 1,800 to 1,500 would do so much justice to so many people. Just on yesterday, I had a student work a 12-hour shift, came into school, and he said, Mr. Sams, that's what they call me, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Now, if I give him an opportunity to maybe not do 1,800, but 1,500, that seems to be the sweet spot, not just across the country, but here in Michigan, where our things are very, very antiquated. And in closing, as someone who still works in the classroom every day, still mentoring, still shifting heads, shaping heads and shaping lives, I do want to ask you guys for some grace on this, and please give us the opportunity to push this forward. Thank you.
Great, and thank you for keeping that brief.
I am the son of a preacher, so my dad says this all the time. I don't want to make you happy twice.
Got it, and I'm not going to air any grievances of bad haircuts of the past.
Well,
but
yours looks really good.
Thank you. Minority Vice Chair Grant does have a question.
Thank you. I will keep this really quick. I've heard this as an issue many times, so thank you, Representative. My question is, for a barber license, are students eligible for financial aid?
Yes.
Okay, shifting the hours, does that change their eligibility?
No, actually, the cosmetology license is also $1,500 in Michigan, and if you look at the curriculums next to each other, they're essentially identical. Barbers do straight razors, cosmetology do more nails and skin.
So they can get fully covered, and they'll just have to pay less for school?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And that was another thing that we're, looking to do, is help the financial burden.
That's a great question. And being no further questions, I thank you both, all
Thank
three
you.
of you, for your testimony.
Thank you.
And hopefully we can get more people in there, Mr. Sams. Thank you. We do have a couple cards to read in. In support of the bill is Paige Fultz from Lara. Also in support of the bill is Janet Scorp from the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. All right, moving on. And Representative Steele, with obviously nerves and patience of steel, is going to come up and testify on House Bill 4933. So begin when you're ready,
Thank you,
Representative.
Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to speak. House Bill 4933 addresses licenses regarding renewal and relicensures. So this bill increases accountability by requiring LARA to issue or deny a license not more than 90 days or 30 days if it's a real estate broker. If that deadline isn't met, the applicant receives a refund and a 15% discount on the next renewal, ensuring the government meets the same service expectations we expect of the private sector. So these changes will put the onus on the department to reissue a license if the license lapses in a quick time manner, and so these licensed professionals can go back to work quickly and easily. So additionally, the bill supports our military service members by exempting them from the fees and continuing education while they are deployed, protecting their professional standing while they serve the country. In short, this bill is about fairness, efficiency, and respect for the professionals and for our taxpayers, of course. So Laura did reach out to our office, and they did have a couple implementation amendments that seemed worthy if you guys had the opportunity to look at them. And that's it. Thank you.
Great, and thank you for your testimony, Representative. I see no questions, so you were thorough.
Thank you.
Thank you. And members too, I know today, seemed kind of rushed, and so I'd urge, further questions on any of these bills, get with your minority vice chair or myself or the bill sponsors themselves, get some of them questions cleared up. So that's it for testimony today. So no questions, no cards, so that concludes our agenda for this morning. Our plan will be to vote these out. So seeing no further questions, Representative Begole moves to excuse all absent members. There being no objection, absent members are excused. There being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.